In 1969, two teenage boys named Bill Gates and Paul Allen met for the first time. They were both interested in programming and the emerging industry of personal computers. A few years later, in 1975, the two childhood friends established the company Microsoft with a hyphen. The name is a portmanteau of the words microcomputer and software. In 1980, the company entered the industry of operating systems with their own version of Unix called Xenix. But their first major breakthrough came with the release of MS-DOS in 1981. After a few years of battling against IBM's PC-DOS, Microsoft eventually came out as the leading provider. At this point, most operating systems looked like this: a black screen where you could execute commands and in return would receive some nice text. Absolutely fantastic for its time, no doubt, but not very interesting to the average person. So in 1985, Microsoft released a graphical extension to MS-DOS. Bill Gates almost named it Interface Manager, but the head of marketing convinced him of naming it Windows instead. At first, Windows was not that popular and rival company Apple took the lead. But this would soon change. Windows 3.0 became the first widely successful version of Windows and a strong competitor to Apple's Mac OS. In 1990, Microsoft introduced the now widely successful Microsoft Office with software like Word and Excel. Windows 95 became a huge success for the company and introduced features like the Start menu and Internet Explorer. From here on out, Windows would continue to completely dominate the market, and as such, Microsoft was often accused of monopolization. At the start of the new millennium, Microsoft entered the video game console market with the Xbox to compete against Sony and Nintendo. While the Xbox could not really keep up with the PlayStation 2, it was nonetheless a success, selling millions of units. In more recent years, the perception of Microsoft and especially Windows has been a bit unstable. For example, Windows Vista sold well, but is considered by many to be one of the worst operating systems ever made by Microsoft. Windows 7 rekindled the brand, but Windows 8 once again received heavy criticism for many of its significant changes. But despite a few minor setbacks here and there, Microsoft is still one of the most valuable brands in the world. Since 2012, Microsoft has undergone a major rebranding to coincide with the release of Windows 8. One major change was made to the logo of the company. For the first time, a version of the famous Windows logo was included in the official Microsoft logo. But the four tiles are more than just an icon for Windows. Each tile are supposed to stand for Windows, Office, Xbox and Bing. And the logo isn't exactly new either, as it has been used before, for example in this Windows 95 commercial.
It used to be difficult for personal computers to do more than one thing.
When preparing to launch Windows XP back in 2001, Microsoft wanted a catchy slogan to go along with it. They eventually settled for "Prepare to Fly" and began printing all promotional material and covers and so on. Then 9/11 happened and suddenly the slogan wasn't as catchy anymore. Because of this, Microsoft had to spend over $200 million just to change the slogan to "Yes, you can" instead.
Yes, you can!
Around the mid to late 1990s, Internet Explorer quickly became the standard browser all across the globe, since it came bundled with the operating system. And by 2002 it reached its peak of a staggering 95% market share. Then something happened. New browsers like Opera and Firefox slowly began eating away at Microsoft's browser monopoly. This got Microsoft a bit worried, so to counteract this decline, they employed some pretty foul tactics. For example, in 2001, it was revealed that Microsoft had purposely made MSN.com either inaccessible or incorrectly displayed on the Opera browser. This was so that Opera users would hopefully switch over to Internet Explorer instead. While Microsoft has never responded to the accusations, Opera Software retaliated by releasing a so-called Bork edition of Opera 7. This special version would only display MSN.com using the incomprehensible language made famous by the Swedish chef from The Muppet Show. Every website and service with users and profile pictures has one of these, a default avatar. It's usually just a standard silhouette of a person or whatever YouTube is going for. Anyway, one version of Microsoft's email client, namely Outlook 2010, uses this icon. It's interesting because this is actually a silhouette of Bill Gates from 1977, when he was arrested for speeding and driving without a license.
Damn, it feels good to be a gangster.
When Microsoft introduced the first version of Windows Update shortly after the release of Windows 98, they named the software Critical Update Notification Tool. However, they soon had to change this to Critical Update Notification Utility, given the unfortunate acronym created by the former. The default wallpaper used for Windows XP is, or at least was, one of the most recognizable images in the world. The photograph named Bliss was taken by former National Geographic photographer Charles O'Rear and was captured here in Sonoma County in California in 1996. While many believe the image to be photoshopped, it is in fact the raw, unaltered original. After he'd taken the photo, he put it up for sale on the stock image site Corbis, and Corbis is in fact owned by Bill Gates himself. So around 2000, Microsoft contacted O'Rear and wanted to buy all the rights to the image. And while the exact amount has never been disclosed, it's been said to be one of the largest payments ever made for a single photograph. If you were to visit the site today, however, you would most likely not recognize it, as the green hill is now covered with grapevines. Before Microsoft launched their new search engine in 2009, they needed a short and memorable name. Eventually, they decided to use Bang. But they had to rethink this decision rather quickly, as it didn't work as well when used as a verb. As in, let me just bang that real quick. They changed Bang into Bing, and while Google is of course at the top, Bing is still one of the largest search engines in the world. Large corporations like Microsoft are known to take copyright and trademark infringement very seriously. Sometimes, however, they seem to take it a bit too seriously. Back in 2004, a teenager named Mike Rowe registered the domain mikerowesoft.com. So phonetically, when said out loud, it almost sounds like you're saying Microsoft. Only based on this, Microsoft decided to take legal action against Mike Rowe, and the whole thing received worldwide media attention. The website itself had nothing to do with Microsoft or any of their products, as he used it to run his own part-time web design business. But eventually an agreement was reached with Mike Rowe granting ownership of the domain to Microsoft in exchange for various Microsoft products, including an Xbox. 2004, when an Xbox could solve anything. Simpler times. Back when Windows made its debut, things were simple. The first release, named Windows 1.01, was indeed version 1.01. Makes sense. And it continued to make sense for quite a while. The name and actual version of the software matched each other. Then they started using names like Windows 95, 98, NT, ME, 2000 XP and Vista, and things got a bit more confusing. Windows Vista is actually version 6.0, Windows 7 is 6.1, Windows 8 is 6.2, and 8.1 is 6.3. Now the logical thing would be to expect the next release to be named Windows 9 with a version number of 6.4, but instead they announced this. Windows 10? Why skip the 9? Microsoft's official explanation is that this new release of Windows will, from here on out, be Windows. In other words, each new update will just have a new version number and not a new name. Another possibility, though, is that the name Windows 9 could cause issues for some legacy applications. Thousands of programs could be using code like this to check what version of Windows it's running on. Basically, it's checking if the name includes a 9, and if it does, it means it's either Windows 95 or 98. But if Windows 9 was introduced, it would completely disrupt this system and potentially cause some major issues. Then again, Microsoft isn't exactly the most consistent when it comes to naming stuff. This video is part of a collaboration with All Time Tens. They made a video about Google over on their channel, and if you want to, you can click the annotation to check it out.
Simple as possible. In early tests, participants sat staring at the screen rather than using the site. When asked why they were waiting, they responded that the page was so blank that they thought it hadn't finished loading. As a result, the Google copyright banner was added as an end marker. The founders now insist on a 20
These days, people are getting divorced left and right. It's really not an issue in most parts of the world. You can get divorced for any reason, really. Back in the day, as in way back in the day, like a couple of centuries ago, it wasn't such an easy task. During the 16th and 17th century in France, male impotence was considered a crime and thus legal grounds for a divorce. Basically, if you couldn't get it up, your wife could legally end the marriage. No fucking pressure, or should I say no fucking pressure. And as you can imagine, wives saw this as a way to escape their marriage for any reason really, as all they had to do was accuse their husband of incompetence. Of course, it wasn't that simple though. You see, as with any crime, you need evidence to prove that what you say is in fact true. So when a husband was charged with the crime of erectile dysfunction, he was to demonstrate his powers of erection before an expert team of priests, surgeons, and midwives. These experts would carefully examine his equipment to reach an opinion on its elastic tension, natural motion, and ability to ejaculate. Should he, against all odds, fail this test, he had but one option left: to demand trial by Congress, wherein he would be given 2 hours to have sex with his accuser, his wife, as the ultimate proof that he could indeed perform in the bedroom. Should he fail this test as well, it would not only result in the dissolution of the marriage, he would also be ridiculed by the public for many years to come. When you're having sex, is it possible to get stuck? Unable to pull out, so to speak? And don't claim you haven't thought about this, we have all thought about this, and believe it or not, it's not a myth, it is actually possible. But what are words compared to an illustration? So, let me illustrate. I actually went to the store and bought a pack of donuts and sausages just for this video. This phenomenon even has a name, which is penis captivus. While science isn't entirely sure why this is happening, what is happening is that the muscles of the vagina clamp down on the penis, which makes it impossible to withdraw. Luckily, this is an extremely rare thing, and in case it should ever happen to you, it usually only lasts for a couple of minutes. Usually. Out of context, things such as a person's saliva, sweat, semen, and body odor is often seen as very disgusting. So why aren't we more disgusted by sex and other sexual interactions? A study was conducted to find out why, and what they found was that sexual arousal actually lowers your level of disgust, which in turn allows us to regard sex as a very pleasant experience instead of an unpleasant, disgusting one. Disgust-induced avoidance is the scientific term for not wanting to do something disgusting, and normally you would not want to drink from this glass of juice with a dead insect in it. If you're sexually aroused, however, it's a lot more likely that you won't care and take a sip anyway. Not only do women have longer, multiple, and more intense orgasms, they have other ways of achieving it than just regular sex. For example, as much as 15% of women can achieve orgasm by working out. The more scientific term for it would be exercise-induced orgasms, but it's more commonly referred to as coregasm, as it happens when performing certain ab exercises. It's not entirely clear how this happens, but it is, unfortunately for all men, a women exclusive. Anywhere from 1 to 5% of women can also climax by stimulation of their nipples alone, a so-called nipple-gasm. Of course, women doesn't get all the fun, as guys have a much higher chance of actually having an orgasm in the first place. In many studies, men climax around 80% of the time during regular intercourse, while women orgasm as seldom as 25% of the time. If you want to give both parties the maximum probability of success, oral sex is the way to go. Size does, in fact, matter, not necessarily in the way you think though, as research have found that fat men last significantly longer in bed compared to more slender and fit men. Heavier men are able to make love for an average of 7.3 minutes, while men with a more healthy BMI only last for an average of 1.8 minutes. The reason for this is female hormones. Men with excess fat has higher levels of the female sex hormone called estradiol. This substance disrupts their body's natural male chemicals and slow down their progression towards orgasm. The average length of an erect human penis is roughly between 13 and 15 centimeters, and a penis with a length of less than 7 centimeters is medically referred to as a micropenis. Now, the question is of course, is it big enough? Studies show that around half of all men think their dick is too small, while 7 out of 8 women think their man's length is just fine. So for the most part, size isn't as significant as many men seem to think it is. On the other hand, the average depth of the human vagina is anywhere between 6 and 13 centimeters. So all this makes you wonder why we associate a large penis with manlyhood, because for the most part of history it's actually been the other way around. From ancient Greece to ancient Rome, all the way up to the Renaissance, a small penis was better. In fact, in many plays and stories, male characters were punished by receiving a much larger penis. Michelangelo's David is another example. It wasn't until the late 1800s and early 1900s when pornographic photography and motion pictures paved the way for the modern porn industry. And a large focus of porn is namely the penis. It wasn't long until bigger meant better, and comically large penises, much like gigantic breasts, took center stage. Around 25% of all men say that they have faked an orgasm. You might be wondering how that's possible, but men can actually orgasm without ejaculating, which means that faking it isn't that much of a problem. On the other hand, over 70% of women claim to have faked it. For the longest time, it was believed that humans were the only creatures that had sex for pleasure. We now know that this isn't the case, as quite a few animals have been observed doing just that. Some examples are dolphins, hyenas, seahorses, and bonobo apes. And it's not just in the form of regular sex, no. Bonobo apes in particular are extremely diverse in their sexual behavior. Things such as masturbation, homosexuality, bisexuality, oral sex, and necrophilia are just a few things that bonobos do all the time. And I really mean all the time. They use sexual acts to resolve conflicts, to greet each other, and as bargaining for trading food. As a result, bonobo apes are an extremely peaceful species. Being a virgin over a certain age is very stigmatized in many parts of the world. In the United States and Europe, for example, most people have sex for the first time between the ages of 16 and 18, but almost 30% of people between the ages of 15 and 24 are still virgins. Not only that, but most women who lose their virginity between the ages of 16 and 18 wish that they had waited a little longer. And while it's difficult to say, anywhere from 1 to 4% of all people in the US die without ever having sex. A few famous people are known, or at least highly suspected, to have died as virgins as well. For example, Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, Andy Warhol, Queen Elizabeth I, J. Edgar Hoover, and Joseph Cornell, among others. During the 13th century, Genghis Khan founded and ruled the Mongol Empire, the largest land empire in all of history. In his quest for dominance, around 40 million people or so were killed in his name. At the time, that was 10% of the entire world's population. Now, like most guys, Genghis Khan liked sex. Very much so, in fact, because Genghis Khan did not fuck around when it came to fucking around. He had so much sex with so many women that today, around 16 million men are direct descendants of Genghis Khan. That's 1 in every 200 men alive today, and a staggering 10% of all men who reside within the borders of the now long-gone Mongol Empire are his descendants. It's not known how many lovers he had, but estimates range from a couple of hundreds to several thousands. I wonder if he felt like he had to give something back to the world after taking so many from it. Nah, I probably just like to fuck.